This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy and here I talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 38 where I'll be sharing what I've been knitting for the past few weeks. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than my traditional podcasts. Normally I go through if I have any finished objects and then I share updates on all of my ongoing projects and new cast-ons and share if I have any new yarn. But today I have a lot of finished objects to share. It's been a long time since I filmed my last podcast and there's just too much to talk about in one episode. I didn't want to feel rushed with all the information that I would be sharing with you all. Didn't want to leave out any important details. So today's episode I'm going to be sharing 3 finished objects with you all. I have my T number 1, my Chrysler top, and my DRK Everyday Sweater, and that will be the entire episode. I'll be saving new cast-ons and ongoing projects for my next episode. However, that next episode I'll be filming this week or next week, so you don't have to wait a whole full 2 weeks for that. It's just going to be following whenever I upload again. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for joining me. You guys might remember or you know that we recently have moved. My background I briefly explained in my summer video, but if you haven't seen that yet, where I'm filming at now is not our new house. We were recently moving out of our old apartment and into a new house that we just purchased, our first house, but there is a lot of work going on at the new house. It's kind of old. I would call it a fixer-upper, and there was just too much going on for us to fully move in on the same day that we had to leave our apartment. So I'm staying with my husband at my parents' house, thankful that they live in Massachusetts where we also live, so it was kind of convenient to stay here temporarily while some stuff gets finished up at the new house. If you're curious, specifically we were getting our floors redone, and floors, it's just really tricky to live and set up all of our furniture in the new house knowing that we would have to move and shuffle all of that for them to finish the floors, so it just made sense to not set up our furniture, to not live there until all the floors were done, and then we can set up everything and not worry about the floors in the future. Definitely appreciate all the well wishes. We're super excited. Obviously, this has been a super chaotic month with the transitioning, moving out, moving in, half moving in, staying here at not our house. So I've done a lot of knitting, surprisingly, even though the past month or and a half has been so chaotic. I feel like I knit a little bit more than usual because things were getting packed up and I didn't have access to like my other things. I wasn't really cooking a lot, and so it's just a lot of downtime and packing. I needed those mental breaks, so I'd like pack a box and then sit down and knit for a few minutes and then pack more. So I was able to get a lot done. I was able to finish 3 whole projects. They all were started like before we really started moving, and now I'm here to share them with you all. Before I get into the projects, I do want to take a few moments to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where you can build your online presence from the ground up, which is what I did to create my new website, ne-knits.com. With Squarespace's templates, you can easily create a website in just a few minutes and easily plug in your logo colors and your favorite fonts to create a website that's tailored to your brand. You can also integrate social media channels like your Instagram profile and so much more. With a Squarespace site, you can easily sell a variety of products, including digital products like knitting patterns, or you can also sell physical items like handmade hats in the wintertime. If you're interested in your own Squarespace site, head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your website, head to squarespace.com and use the code NEKNITS to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now we'll get into the projects. First, let's start with what I'm wearing today. This is T number 1 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. It's the first finished object I'll be talking about. This project is, or this pattern is a t-shirt pattern that is a saddle shoulder design. It's knit from the top down. It's a seamless pattern, and some design features it's known for are the saddle shoulder like panels coming down here. It has folded down collar, folded down hems, and overall has like an oversized boxy fit. The suggested yarns for this pattern are 2 yarns held together. They are Gepard Wild and Soft, which is a fingering weight, 60% merino wool, 40% 40% Tussa silk blend, and then held together with a strand of gepard garn cashmere lace, which is a lace weight 100% cashmere yarn. Together, I think Ravelry labels that as like a fingering weight knit, but I feel like that would make it kind of sport weight if you're doing fingering plus a lace weight. The suggested needle size is 3.5 millimeters. However, I knit mine on 3.75 millimeters to get gauge. The recommended ease for this pattern changes depending on what size you are within the size range. For sizes extra small through XL, the recommended positive ease is 4 to 6 inches or 10 to 15 centimeters. If you are in the size range of 2XL to 4XL, the recommended ease is 3 to 4.75 inches or 8 to 12 centimeters. I'm in the lower size range. I picked size 2 for myself, which based on my bust measurement was the recommended size, which if I knit to gauge would give me about 6 inches of positive ease. So right at the upper end of positive ease for me. I did knit mine with the suggested yarns. I was able to get some gepard yarn on a trip to Oslo that I had taken. The colors that I used were called Glacier, that's the wild and soft, and then the cashmere lace is called New Wild Sky. So the fingering weight yarn was a little bit lighter, where the cashmere lace is a little bit darker. With the saddle shoulder construction, there's a lot going on with making like the top yoke part of this t-shirt. You start by knitting the 2 shoulder panels separately flat. So you can see here these 2 rectangles, these are just knit, and you end up putting the stitches at the end on hold. And then you start with the back. Once you have your 2 shoulder panels, you pick up along the sides for the back. There's a lot of short row shaping to give the shoulders a bit of an angle, and then you connect the back neck with some backwards loop cast on stitches. Then you put those on hold, and then you do the same thing for the front. You pick up along the side of those rectangles, you do some short row shaping, you end up casting on with backwards loop for the neckline after doing some increases that you can see here, and then you knit the front down. Both the front and the back have a little bit of increasing for the underarm, which you can see right there. And then lastly, you join in the round and then knit the rest of the body in the round in stockinette. After all of that is done, or at any point that you decide to do the sleeves, you end up putting your live stitches back on the needles, and then you end up picking up more stitches for the sleeve here, very similar to a drop shoulder. There is some short row shaping within the sleeve as well, and then you knit the sleeve in stockinette before doing the folded hem. So definitely a very engaging knit. You know, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of ends to weave in. It definitely kept me pretty engaged and interested in the pattern. I feel like the short row shaping was kind of fun. I always like short row shaping. I feel like it just gives me something to look forward to in the next row, like, oh, the next turn, just knit to the next turn. So I really enjoyed knitting on this. I kind of knit on it exclusively, and you'll notice that with my other finished projects today, I kind of have been knitting monogamously, which is not normal for me. I usually hop from project to project, but lately I've been just kind of into getting in the zone with one project and just working on it until it's done before starting the next thing. So that's been really fun, and it allows me to finish the projects a little bit faster, which is always a plus in my mind. I really enjoyed the feel of the yarn on my needles, and that also helped with the knitting experience. It was just really easy for me to knit on this in stockinette while I was multitasking or just wanting a nice calm evening of knitting. So I mentioned that this pattern features the folded neckline and the folded hems. For the hems of both the sleeves and the body, I do the folded hem as part of the bind off. So you have the option of either doing it as part of the bind off, or you can bind off separately and then hand stitch the folded hem down. There is a purl row at each hem to make the fold super clean and easy to see, and I just like the experience of doing it with the bind off. I think it keeps it pretty crisp and pretty neat and gives it still a good amount of stretch, and it's just easier for me to manipulate the hem with my needles rather than doing like a tapestry needle. It's just something that I prefer, but obviously whichever method you choose, I don't really think there's a better or a worse way. Now for the neckline, you do have to sew it down with a tapestry needle as you do bind off, and the bind off of the neckline creates the sort of like chain stitches that you can see here. You might recognize this as just like a normal traditional bind off. I did talk a little bit about how I did the sewn down neckline in my previous podcast, so if you want all the details about that, you can watch podcast 37. I have the time chapters so you can see, but basically you just gotta go slow. I use markers to mark like major milestones, like markers for the flat edge here, markers for the diagonal edge here, just to be sure that after every like 10 or 20 stitches, I was still lining up the neckline appropriately and not making it crooked. Time consuming, but worth the finished result. I mean, the neckline was the one reason why I chose to knit this pattern. I just feel like it looks so crisp and looks so good, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Now, for the fit of my T number 1, I knew going into this pattern, this is like a super boxy fit. It's pretty oversized. I knew I was knitting a size for myself that was on the upper end of the suggested positive ease, so I was a little bit worried about how this would look on me. I am petite. I'm only 5'0", and so generally oversized garments can be kind of overwhelming on my like small frame. Sometimes people even say that petite people should not wear oversized garments. I don't believe that anyone should or shouldn't wear anything, but I acknowledge that with my proportions, things that are oversized, I feel like I have to be a little bit more cautious of like how the proportions of like the sleeves are or the body length are. If I had the oversized fit and the oversized sleeves, maybe having an oversized body length was just going to be too much oversized for this t-shirt, so I knew I wanted the t-shirt to be somewhat cropped. So I did do that. I kind of knit it a little bit shorter than what the pattern suggested. I kind of knit it to a length where I thought it would hit at my high-waisted shorts pretty closely, and it certainly was not going to be the long length that I could French tuck with a lot of overhanging fabric as seen in the sample photo for the pattern. I don't really think I like measured the body length when I was knitting it. I kind of just like kept trying it on as I was knitting, and then when I got to a point that I thought it looks good, I stopped and then bound off and continued to the folded hem with which just added like an inch of length. I finished this part like so long ago, I really can't remember if I cast off the body before starting the sleeves or if I kind of left the body almost done, then jumped over to do the sleeves, and then once the sleeves were done, go back to the body. Now for the sleeves, one of the other things that I really like about this pattern is how the sleeves are like the long short sleeves. I just like that style. I just like how it's a part of the design. I knew I wanted the long short sleeves, so I knit mine to right at the bend of my elbow, which is pretty much matching the sample photo of the pattern. Now for me, that was about 2 inches shorter than the suggested length. Again, something similar where I just like kept trying it on as I was knitting to see where exactly it would hit when it was done. Now, once I finished the sleeves and I'd finished the body with what I thought were good lengths for what I wanted in the t-shirt, before I blocked it, I had tried this on. I was like, all right, I feel like that's the most exciting part, the try on, when you're done knitting all of the portions and then you see how it looks finally all put together. And this t-shirt scared me. I thought it was going to be a bust because when I had tried this on before blocking, it just looked so weird. I don't know. It looks kind of ugly, dare I say. I was posting on Instagram about how I was really concerned how I didn't like the fit of it. I think it wasn't necessarily the fit, but it was like the fabric was super stiff. The like sleeves were kind of like open and not really moving. I feel like the body was very like stiff and not flowing, but a lot of people were saying just block it, just block it. Blocking will fix a lot of those issues with the fabric. So I did block it. I mean, I was always planning on blocking it, and thank goodness I did because it really transformed with blocking. This fabric has some cashmere, it has some silk, so I knew that it should have like a good amount of drape, and the blocking really changed how this laid on me. I feel like the blocking really evened out this shoulder portion. It really evened out like the flow of the sleeve. It really evened out like the body, and it just had a lot more drape and a lot more flexibility, and I feel like it looked so much better after blocking. Now the blocked finished object for me, it still felt a little bit long. I decided to crop it by about an inch from what I had when I had finished blocking and it was all cast off. So I did have to undo my sewn down hem. I did have to rip back and then reknit the folded hem, but it wasn't too difficult, and I definitely am happy with the length that it's at now. I feel like it's the perfect length where when I wear my favorite high-waisted shorts or high-waisted jeans with this t-shirt, It looks good both untucked, but it's still long enough where I can tuck it in with a little French tuck if I want to. And I'm just really happy with how it turned out, especially since I was so scared about how it was going to be before it was blocked. I do find that this t-shirt styles the best with tighter fitting bottoms. I think the contrast of the oversized top with not so oversized bottoms is just a look that I prefer in my outfit choices. I think it's a very unique piece in my wardrobe. I'm not really dying to knit a ton more of T number ones or a ton more of this style, like oversized boxy t-shirt. I think the fabric is wonderful. I didn't knit this thinking it would be like a summer t-shirt, although I did knit it in the summer. I knew that this is going to be something more for the spring or like early fall, like transitional. I mean, there's wool, there's cashmere in here. It's kind of thick. It's like very full coverage, so it definitely is warm. You're not going to catch me wearing it this July or August. I think maybe September or October would be prime T number one weather. I really like the color on me. I really like the very subtle marling that the two yarns have together, and I just really loved working with the cashmere. I feel like holding the lace strand of cashmere really makes this piece feel very luxurious. It's kind of the similar thing with mohair where when you like touch it, you just feel the cashmere, but there's no hairiness from the mohair. There's some halo, but it's really not dramatic at all. If you can see, there's like a little bit of halo, but not really. It just feels really nice. I would love to knit with like a strand of cashmere lace again. I would love to use it as maybe an alternative to mohair in like a winter sweater. I'm just really happy with the result. I don't have my yarn scale with me as it's packed in all of my stuff, so I'm not able to provide exact yarn quantities that I used. However, I do know I used less than 5 balls of this because I bought 5 balls of the Wild and Soft, and I still have a whole ball of the Wild and Soft. So I think that means I used like a little bit less than 4 balls of the Wild and Soft. And then for the cashmere lace, I bought 3 skeins, and I did use most of the last skein, or maybe half of the last skein. So I'm going to estimate it at 2.5 skeins of the cashmere lace for my size 2 t-shirt that has a lot of cropping in both the sleeves and the body, if that helps any of you who might be interested in knitting this pattern as well. So that's my T number 1. I am planning on posting a project review blog article on my website, so if you ever need to refer back to the specs that I just went over but don't have time to watch this whole video again, feel free to head to my website where you can see that blog article posted shortly. All right, moving on to my next finished object. See, I knew I was going to be talking for such a long time about these finished objects, so I'm glad I'm just keeping it to FOs today. All right, next I'm going to talk about my Chrysler top. This is a pattern by Pernille Larsen, and a great idea that I got, and I feel like I am upset at myself for not thinking of this sooner, but holding up finished objects on hangers is so much more like natural and better looking than like me trying to hold it up with my 2 arms. I feel like this whole thing going on is like the classic knitter podcast position, even though it looks and feels incredibly awkward. So shout out to Woozy by Celine, who I watch on YouTube. She holds up some of her finished objects with hangers, and I was like, that's so smart. That is so smart. So I'm gonna do this more often. It's just a much easier way to hold up my finished object with one hand. So the Chrysler top is a pattern by Pernille Larsen, or Knitting for Olive. I use the pattern out of the Knitting for Olive book, but you also can purchase the pattern individually on Ravelry or on the Knitting for Olive website. It is a summer camisole, and the suggested yarn is Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which is what I used for my camisole. I used Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color cream. I made the second size in the pattern. The Knitting for Olive patterns do sizing based on like your finished bust circumference. They don't tell you how much negative or positive ease you should have. They just say if your bust circumference is this, you should knit this size. So based on that sizing, I should have knit the 3rd size in the pattern for this tank top for my measurements. However, in my experience, pure silk tank tops stretch a lot with time. I definitely prefer having a tighter initial fit that I know will sort of stretch out into the correct size. So I ended up choosing the 2nd size for myself, so 1 size smaller than suggested, which gave me about 6 inches of negative ease. I knit mine on 2.75 millimeter needles. The suggested needle size is 3 millimeter. I talked about in podcast 37 my experience gauge swatching for this tank top. I basically gauge swatched twice in the incorrect stitch pattern, so my gauge swatches were kind of like a waste of time, and I ended up just casting on with the needle size that I thought would work best. Kind of went in blind, but spoiler alert, it all ended up being okay for this tank top. So the construction of this tank top is bottom up. So you start at the bottom hem, and I chose to cast on with just a regular long tail cast on. I found that it looks the neatest, and compared to like a tubular cast on, I just had a feeling that my tubular cast on with pure silk and such a small gauge, it just wasn't going to look as neat, even though I prefer tubular cast-ons and tubular cast-offs in general. For something like this, I feel like the long tail cast-on was the better choice for me, and I'm pretty happy with how it looks. I always space out my long tail cast-ons with my thumb horizontally to make sure there's enough space between each stitch to give it enough room to stretch appropriately. So this tank top is knit in a modified half-twisted rib pattern. It alternates rows between half-twisted rib and just regular rib, and it creates a really nice texture that I really like. It's not as gapey and like vertical stripey as a full twisted rib, but it also has a totally different look than a regular like ribbing, 1x1 ribbing. So I really like the stitch pattern once I figured out what it was after I finished gauge swatching. So once you cast on at the bottom, there's really nothing fancy about the tank top until you get to the top triangle part. It's just knit straight all the way up. Could be considered kind of boring. I kind of enjoyed it. It was very like methodical, and I really enjoyed knitting with the pure silk. I enjoyed the stitch pattern. Like I really didn't have any issues knitting with the pure silk. So I'm glad that it wasn't too like painful on my hands, and it was just one of those simple patterns that I could knit while multitasking as well. I'm gonna turn the exposure down so you guys can see the stitch pattern a bit better. There we go. I feel like it was blowing out before. I really didn't do any major modifications to this pattern. I knit my body length to the suggested body length in the pattern, which for me was 11 inches before starting all of the bust details. And the pattern really got exciting once you start all of like the bust details. I feel like there is a lot of very intentional shaping and direction. I always like when patterns like aren't doing everything at the same time, because I feel like that's not always the best for fitting on the body. What I mean is like sometimes if I'm doing like a V-neck or like a triangle kind of camisole, you'll have like the V-neck and the armpits and like the back all end at the same exact row, and I feel like that just doesn't always fit very well. You start the decreases for the busts like way earlier before you even split for the underarm, so you do have more underarm coverage than I've experienced with like other camisole patterns. Additionally, the V-neck split in the middle is like not at the same line as everything else. It is kind of like a higher V-neck, which I prefer. I feel like this is something that with the shorter straps and the higher V-neck, it has more coverage, and I'm more comfortable wearing something with more coverage like this. You have these beautiful symmetrical centered decreases that follow the modified half-twisted rib pattern. There is some increasing at the underarm to sort of shape the side of the panel into the triangle, which I think looks really clean. You have stockinette edges along all of the triangles, which I think also looks really clean. And it sort of like rolls over to the back, so from the side and from the front it just looks really crisp. The back of the tank top is just a straight across line. There's no shaping here, it's just straight across, and then you end up finishing it with an applied I-cord that flows really beautifully into the front. The triangles end with the I-cord straps. These are very thick I-cord straps. They are like 7 stitches thick, which is thicker than other straps that I've made on camisoles. And you do sew the straps on at the back because it is a straight across edge. You can put them wherever you need to, which I really like as well. You're not forced to put them at a specific point. So for mine, I actually put on like my favorite t-shirt bra. And then I tried on the tank top, and then I marked along the back where my t-shirt bra straps lay because I wanted it to sort of match. So if I do feel like wearing this with like a regular t-shirt bra, it has like the most coverage that it could have. It doesn't have like, it's not like off center or misaligned. For the strap length, I did follow the suggested strap length in the pattern. They are pretty short, like I said, so it does bring the V-neck kind of high up, which is what I prefer. If you're interested in a lower V-neck, you can make the straps longer, but I like the shorter straps. I feel like it feels more secure, and I actually had to lengthen the straps by like 1/2 inch compared to the suggested because it just felt like a little bit too tight on my shoulder. So my straps ended up being 9.5 inches before I sewed them down. Now, spaghetti straps, in my experience, always stretch out a ton in camisoles, especially knit out of plant fibers. So I tried my best while I was knitting the I-cord straps to like really like stretch them as I was knitting. Like I really tugged at them. I was like trying to get the most stretch out of them as I could as I was knitting, so that way when I measured the final length, I knew it was like the stretched out length. And like I said before, the straps did feel pretty tight before attaching them, so I feel like that helps with how they're going to stretch out over time. So far, I don't really have any issues with these straps. They feel very secure. They weren't really slipping off my shoulders. And I might consider putting some elastic in them for the future just to be safe. But so far, I'm pretty happy with how the straps turned out. I think it would be really cool if someone modified this tank top with the straps. Like you could do like a crossback with the straps if you made them like really long, but then you cross them, then you would have no risk of the straps falling off. You could also knit them like longer, but do like a halter top, like tie at the back of the neck. That would be super cute. So lots of variability with this Chrysler top. I really love how the fabric is. The pure silk knit single is like, it's so nice. And this cream color, I was like really excited to have like a crisp white tank top in my wardrobe. I feel like this is something that I can style with a lot of different outfits, a lot of different like colored bottoms, because I feel like in my summer wardrobe, I have some like colorful skirts or shorts. I'm not necessarily wearing colorful pants in the winter, but in the summer, like this would look so cute with like a red floral skirt. In terms of bra friendliness, I mean, it is a spaghetti strap camisole, so you really can't expect too much bra friendliness with this. I feel comfortable wearing this with a normal bra. Obviously, you can still see the straps, but that's like personal preference. But I've also worn this with just like little sticky bra thingies that just go on the front, and I'm comfortable with that. And I feel like this fabric, it's not really see-through. I was worried it would be kind of see-through, but it's really not, which is good. I don't want it to be see-through. So there's my Chrysler top. I'm really excited to be wearing this summer. I really enjoyed knitting it. Would really recommend the pattern for just lots of attention to detail. It just feels very well written out and very well designed. Oh, similarly with my like other projects, I don't have my yarn scale, so I don't know exactly how much yarn I used for that camisole, but this is what I have left of my second ball of pure silk. I started with 2 balls. This is what I have left. So I feel like maybe I used like 1 3/4 balls of the pure silk for that tank. But again, in the future, when I get my yarn scale back, I will update my Ravelry notes with all of the weight details for this project. All right, I have one more finished object to share with you all, and that is my DRK Everyday Sweater. Here it is. So I had started this sweater in April, but for some reason I feel like I haven't had this like a lot on my podcast. I think I showed you guys the beginning of the yoke. I don't know if I showed you much after that, but this is a basic top-down circular yoke sweater. It's a pattern by Andrea Mowry, and it's called the Everyday Sweater just because it's meant to be like a sweater that you can wear on like any day. It's casual, it's simple, and kind of everyday knitting pattern. This is a sport weight knit. The yarn that I use is Juniper Moon Farm Patagonia Organic Merino in the color Violet, which is so beautiful. This yarn was gifted to me by the Twisted Pearl Yarn Studio, and here it is up close. It is a sort of rustic merino from Argentina. It's a 2-ply. It's beautifully like lofty. It has some stickiness. If you're used to like knitting for Olive merino or Sanascarn Sunday merino, this definitely does not feel like that. It has a lot of texture. It has like a bit of heathering in the color or even a bit of tweediness. This was really nice to work with. As someone who's not really used to like super rustic yarns, and this is not super rustic in any way, but definitely more rustic than what I'm used to, I thought it was like really nice to knit with. It feels a little bit like tough at first, but it's one of those yarns that blocks absolutely beautifully. So for my sweater, I made this suggested size for my bust measurement, which was size 2. The recommended ease for this pattern is 2 to 4 inches, and by picking size 2 for me, it should give me about 4 inches of positive ease. It is knit top down, so you start by casting on at the neckline. It is a 2x2 ribbed like detail sweater, so I started with a 2x2 tubular cast on, which basically starts out as a 1x1 regular tubular cast on, but then you rearrange the stitches when you start knitting into 2x2 rib. I think it looks really crisp and clean. And then once you finish the neckline, you go straight into the body. I use size 4mm needles for my sweater to meet gauge. The recommended needle size is a US 5 or 3.75mm needle. And you knit the body. You start with some short rows to raise the back neck so you can sort of see The back here is taller than the front, which helps with shaping a lot. The short rows are written for wrap and turns. This was like the first time in a really long time that I had knit some wrap and turn short rows, but it was super easy to follow, and I feel like they're pretty invisible. I feel like you can barely see them, which is kind of nice. And then you just go into your circular yoke shaping. There are 4 increase rounds in the yoke. If you're unfamiliar with circular yoke shaping, I feel like it's like the easiest kind of shaping that you can get into. Very beginner friendly because you just increase at even intervals of stitches, and then you knit like a stretch of stockinette, and then in your next increase round you just increase like every X amount of stitches, and it's pretty easy to follow. I think I used make one lefts for my increases. It didn't really matter which one you use, but for me, make one left is easier to knit, so that's just what I ended up doing. And then once you're done increasing, you then split for sleeves and continue to knit the body and then the sleeves. The sleeves have a very nice taper and are finished with 2x2 ribbing, similarly to the bottom hem, which features a very wide stretch of 2x2 ribbing. This is about 4 inches of ribbing. So I really like the proportions of how this sweater has like the big 2x2 ribbing at the bottom, and it just looks really cute and simple. So a couple things to note with my version of this project, or my version of this pattern or my project. I feel like my yoke shaping, I could have done a little bit more math to figure out where my increase rounds were going to end up. So I followed the pattern exactly, and you basically follow the pattern, and then once you're done doing the increases, it says to like knit until your yoke is like 8 inches long from the cast on or something like that. And so I had finished the last round of increases, and then I measured it, and I was like pretty much at the required length for my yoke depth. So I was like getting ready to split for sleeves like 2 or 3 rows like right after the last increase row. I don't know if that necessarily is like the best for the shaping of this sweater. Maybe I needed to like calculate my row gauge out and then like readjust my increase rounds to be a little bit more evenly distributed, so that way I'd have like a little bit more knitting before I split for sleeves. But I don't think it really matters too much. I feel like you can kind of see where the last increase round happens, and then you can see the sleeve split happens right there. So I don't know if that's a problem or not. I feel like it didn't really affect the final fit, but maybe that wasn't the original intent of the pattern. So this is a finished object. I have cast off, I have blocked it. However, after trying it on, I don't think it's actually finished. I didn't realize that I made this like a bit too cropped. So I knew when knitting this sweater that I wanted it to be like a little bit shorter than the recommended length. I wanted it to hit close to my high-waisted pants, and because it is such a long stretch of ribbing after the body, I feel like it was kind of hard to visualize what the final length would be when knitting the stockinette, because, you know, I would have my needles at here and I'd be like, okay, I need to visualize how this will look with 4 more inches of fabric. And I did have a ruler. I was trying it on, and I was like trying to measure, like I would hold the ruler up here and be like, all right, so this is where it'll hit at 4 inches longer. And when I tried it on, it does hit, I think, exactly where I wanted it to hit based on my measurements. You can see that it hits like right at the top of these high-waisted jeans. However, I don't think I realized that once I added the sleeves pull a lot on the body, and any sort of sleeve movement that I have with the sweater pulls the body up a lot, like a lot more than what I'm comfortable with. It definitely looks cropped. I feel like it just looks a little bit too short. So I think I want to make the body like a couple inches longer. I'm thinking like in between 1 to 2 inches longer will still give me that like shorter cropped fit, but something that maybe doesn't show that much skin, because I'm not really trying to do that while wearing this sweater. Now, I really don't want to undo all of this ribbing to go back and knit like 1 to 2 inches of stockinette. So I think I'm going to do some sweater surgery where I cut right before the ribbing, I put the live stitches back on the needles, and then I knit, and then I Kitchener the ribbing back on. I haven't done that before. I have done a similar mod with a different sweater where I had to cut, but then I just shortened it. So I cut, frogged, and then Kitchenered together. I feel like this isn't going to be too different. Instead of cutting and frogging, I'm going to be cutting and knitting and then Kitchenering. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's going to be less time than it would to undo all of this ribbing. knit 2 inches longer and then do all of the ribbing over again. So that's why I say that I don't think this sweater is like fully finished, because it doesn't feel ready to wear. Now in hindsight, to prevent that issue from happening again, I feel like maybe I would consider knitting the sleeves before finishing the body with this one. With this one, I just didn't do that. I don't know, I was pretty confident with my measurements, but now I know maybe with the specific construction, with the circular yoke, like it's just very dependent on like where the sleeve is sitting and how the body pulls up on where the sleeve moves. Yeah, it's just one of those knits where I gotta give it a little bit more time, even though it would be really awesome to have this done right now. I'm in no rush to wear it, as it is the middle of the summer, so I'll take the time to finish this and get back to you guys with the final finished fit. In general, I really enjoyed knitting this sweater. I really enjoyed knitting with the yarn. I really like the finished fabric. It feels woolly and it feels like hardy, but it still feels soft. It doesn't really feel itchy on my skin. I feel like it's gonna be one of those sweaters that is like super warm. It feels like it's gonna be really warm in the cooler months, even though it is like a thinner sport weight fabric. I feel like it's very flexible and like comfortable on the skin. It's not too bulky, but still has a lot of warmth. So I feel like there's a lot of benefits to this organic merino yarn that I really like, and I would definitely use it again in a different project. In terms of the fit, besides the length of the body, I feel like the circular yoke fit is kind of nice. I really like how the neckline kind of stretches out. It's not really like a boat neck, but it kind of has that like straight across boat neck effect. This is one of the more like closer fitting garments that I've knit for myself compared to like my oversized sweaters that I'm normally knitting, and I really like how it looks. I definitely am looking forward to knitting something with like less ease compared to like 7 or 8 inches of positive ease. Like this has like 3 to 4 inches of positive ease on me, and I like how that looks. It is very tight around my upper arm. Like I feel like there's 0 ease around my bicep, and I don't know if that's intentional or not. I did check my sleeve gauge. My sleeve gauge is accurate, so I guess if you're knitting this, just be cognizant that the sleeves might be tight. I don't mind how tight it is, but I can tell if it was like any tighter, it would be a little bit uncomfortable. But in general, I feel like it just looks very nice with the neckline, the tighter sleeves. It's sort of close on the bust, propped as well. So definitely something different to add to my knit wardrobe, but I really like it. I feel like I normally avoid circular yokes, but I think this one looks pretty good. Definitely excited to get this one kind of fixed up into what I want it to be, but I'm really happy with this sweater. I'm really happy to have a sweater finished in the summer, so that way it'll be ready to go come like early fall with those cozy days of pumpkin spice lattes and pumpkin patches. Oh, I'm so excited for that time of year. So my DRK Everyday Sweater. Big fan of this, great pattern. I think it's pretty beginner friendly because of the circular yoke construction. So if you're looking for something to start with, I think this is a great option. That's the last finished object that I have to share today. That brings us to the end of the episode. Like I said, I do want to save like my cast-ons and other projects for a different episode, just so I can take a break from filming, give myself some time to edit this and get it out to you all. Again, thank you so much for the well wishes on the house and the move. Looking forward to showing you guys like the space, the new space, when it's all ready. I don't know exactly when it'll be ready. I've teased that we're gonna have like a craft room, and you guys are super excited to like see it, which is very exciting, but I don't really know how I'm gonna set it up yet. So I might do like a initial tour or like a organize my stash with me video once I like unpack all of the boxes, but I don't know if it's necessarily gonna be like a finished craft room tour, because I can imagine the craft room is gonna have a couple iterations before it becomes truly what is like optimal for use. And yeah, so excited to do that whenever that time comes. Thank you for your interest, and as always, thank you for watching my video. Everything I talked about will be linked in the description. My Instagram is also linked below. It's @any_knits. I hope to see you all in the next video. Thanks for joining. Bye.